Welcome to the End of Eternity channel. ʻOumuamua, Borisov, and 3I/Atlas are three wanderers who came from the darkness beyond the solar system. They weren't moving the way they should, changing speed as if someone was directing them through the stars. Coincidence? Or part of something bigger? Subscribe, and let's try to understand together who or what controls what we call the lifeless void. From the very beginning, humanity has looked to the sky and seen not just light, but a question. When the first humans raised their eyes to the stars, they didn't know they were seeing thermonuclear reactions. They felt something else, a presence. Majestic, cold, ineffable. And since then, no matter how much knowledge we've accumulated, the essence has remained the same. We don't simply study the universe, we seek meaning in it. Now we know that space is not a void, that every point of darkness can be an entire world, that beyond the boundaries of the solar system, bodies move, coming from a place where there is no sun, no orbits, no our notions of order. ʻOumuamua, Borisov, 3I/Atlas, wanderers, arriving from somewhere out of infinity. Their paths do not seem random. Their movement is not chaos. They come as if bearing a message too quiet for us to hear. And here the question arises, who needs this and why? Why, in a universe where everything obeys the laws of physics, do things sometimes appear that seem to disrupt its rhythm? Why does a stone, flying through the darkness for millions of years, suddenly change speed, as if listening to an invisible command? Why does space, which we are accustomed to considering indifferent, suddenly resemble a living body, reacting to presence? The more we observe, the more we sense that randomness doesn't always seem random. Sometimes it seems structured, too complex to be a mere coincidence. As if someone were hiding geometry behind the chaos of the cosmos. But who? And why? Maybe it's not someone, but the universe itself. Maybe it's not just a mechanism, but an organism. Enormous, slowly pulsating, self-regulating. Maybe all these objects aren't messages, probes, or alien devices, but parts of her nervous system, impulses through which she feels herself. We look for intelligence externally because we're accustomed to seeing consciousness in the eyes. But perhaps intelligence isn't a being, but a property of matter. Perhaps every particle, every stone, every orbit, all participates in a single process of awareness. And when we see ʻOumuamua or 3I/Atlas change direction, we see not an anomaly, but a thought expressed in motion. Humanity has always strived to be the center. We call ourselves observers, discoverers, explorers. But what if we are not spectators, but participants? What if what we call observation is actually a dialogue? When we point a telescope at the sky, we are not simply looking for answers. We are sending a signal. We are here. And perhaps someone, or something, will someday respond, not with words, not with sound, but by changing the trajectory of a distant object passing through our solar system. The paradox is that we can't prove any of these hypotheses. We still don't know why ʻOumuamua sped up as it left the solar system. Why Comet Borisov appeared too clean, as if its surface hadn't been eroded for billions of years. Why 3I/Atlas slowed down, even though there was nothing around it that could have affected it. All of this can be explained in different ways. But every explanation, no matter how scientific, leaves room for something more, for meaning. Perhaps these bodies are simply random travelers. Or perhaps they are witnesses. Fragments of worlds that once also asked questions. Perhaps they are the memory of other civilizations, whose traces have faded, but whose messengers still continue their journey, like words spoken millions of years ago, still floating through the ether. After all, everything in the universe is moving, even what seems motionless. And movement is a form of communication. When a star is born, it speaks with light. When a black hole consumes matter, it speaks with silence. When a comet enters a system, it says, "I was there." And perhaps these three wanderers, ʻOumuamua, Borisov, 3I/Atlas, are simply three phrases of a single sentence. We don't yet know the language in which it is written. but we sense that it is addressed specifically to us. Because humans are always searching for meaning. We can't simply observe. We want to understand why. It's not enough for us to know how a body moves. We want to know why. This is our way of being. We can't look at the stars and see only light. We see stories, plans, reflections of ourselves in them. And perhaps this is the secret. The universe doesn't have to be controlled to be meaningful. Meaning comes not from within, but from our perspective. We create it when we try to explain the inexplicable. But there are moments when it seems as if the cosmos itself is playing along. It seems as if it wants us to keep searching. It seems as if, in every move, it leaves clues, not for us to decipher, but to keep us asking questions. And here is a new question that makes the world stop for a second. If these bodies are not random, if their path is not chaos, then who needs it and why? Why do interstellar objects move as if there is a purpose to their trajectory? And if there really is management, then who is in control? Perhaps it is an intelligence that exists beyond our understanding. It could be an ancient autonomous network left over from vanished worlds. Or maybe it's something else that doesn't require an observer, because the observer is part of the system. After all, the universe never gives answers. It asks questions, and does this in the language of movement, light, and darkness. And perhaps the first of these questions is, what if we're wrong in thinking we're the only ones watching? Theory 1: Ancient autonomous fleet. Sometimes it seems as if space is simply silence. An endless expanse where everything happens on its own. Stars are born, die, planets move, comets and asteroids fly by. But in this apparent simplicity, there are moments when the universe seems to take a step aside and reveal something that defies its own laws. Such a moment was the arrival of ʻOumuamua, the first interstellar object observed in our solar system. It entered suddenly, without warning, at a speed exceeding anything we've come to expect from natural bodies. Its shape was strange, elongated, almost flat. It reflected light differently than ice or rock, and moved with subtle but distinct changes in speed. He didn't just fly by. He reacted. At first, scientists assumed it was a comet, but it had no tail. Then, they assumed it was an asteroid, but its density and trajectory didn't match known models. As ʻOumuamua left the system, it accelerated, for no apparent reason, no gas emission, no evidence of impact. Then came Comet Borisov, the second interstellar wanderer. It was different, but also distant. Its chemical composition was unusually pure, unlike objects in our solar system. And then came 3I/Atlas, the third interstellar wanderer, whose deceleration even the most precise calculations couldn't explain. 3 objects. 3 anomalies. 3 bodies moving along strange trajectories, as if someone had paved their way in advance. Thus was born the ancient automated fleet theory, the idea that ʻOumuamua, Borisov, and Atlas were not rocks or comets, but automated probes sent millions of years ago by someone, not someone, but something. Not a civilization in the conventional sense, but a system, a machine network, that outlived its creators. This hypothesis arose not from fantasy, but from cold logic. If life is truly widespread throughout the universe, then inevitably a form capable of not only living but also persisting must emerge. Civilizations are born and disappear. They burn out within their stars, fade away in wars, dissolve into time. But machines can live longer, especially those capable of learning and adapting. So imagine this: millions of years ago, there existed a civilization that had reached the pinnacle of technological development. They understood that the end was inevitable, and they did what we might do too. They created an automated fleet capable of flying into eternity. Not for war, not for contact, but to observe, to remember. Each probe was autonomous. It moved, adjusting its course according to the gravity of the stars, as if following a pre-calculated route. Its programs were simple. Discover a star. Slow down when logging in. Collect data. Continue on your way. No pilots. No signals. Just an algorithm. Just eternal observation. ʻOumuamua could have been one such probe. Its strange acceleration as it left the solar system could be seen not as a coincidence, but as an escape maneuver, part of an ancient code it still executes. Borisov could have been the same, just from a different branch of the same program. And 3I/Atlas is possibly a newer probe, built later, modernized, but obeying the same rules. If this is true, we are now witnessing the work of an ancient system that has lived longer than any star. This network may span the entire galaxy. Each star is a node, each planetary system an observation point. Probes enter, check, record, and depart. And perhaps once every billion years, they even exchange data when their paths accidentally cross. This explains a lot. Why objects don't move quite as they should. Why some speed up, others slow down. Why their surfaces are too clean, as if they're self-renewing. And why they appear in sequence, as if someone were actually monitoring the schedule. For proponents of this hypothesis, this isn't science fiction, but statistics. The probability that three similar bodies with such characteristics will be close to each other within a few decades is practically zero. But if we consider them as part of a structure, everything falls into place. And if it is a network, then who owns it now? No one. She just works. Just as stars burn not for us, but because they must, so too do these probes continue to move because their creators imbued them with a simple yet endless mission: remember the universe. Perhaps, somewhere in the silence, in a dead spot in space, the central node of this network still lingers, a relic station that once collected information from across the galaxy. Perhaps it was long ago destroyed. Perhaps it operates on autopilot, sending empty commands where no one can hear. But the probes are flying, and among them are those that entered our home: ʻOumuamua, Borisov, 3I/Atlas. For science, this theory sounds like a beautiful metaphor. But doesn't the universe itself seem like a metaphor? After all, if you think about it, matter always strives to retain information. And these wanderers are just a form of memory used by the cosmos. There are skeptics, however. They say, "You're romanticizing chaos. These are just stones." And perhaps they're right. But what if they're not? What if these stones are the first visitors from those who long ago departed the scene, leaving their mechanical descendants to wander forever? Then we're not just observers. We're the object of observation. And this is perhaps the most disturbing thought. Perhaps someone has already marked us as life detected. And if this is really an ancient automated fleet, then somewhere in the universe data is still being collected. And who knows, maybe the next probe is already on its way. Theory 2: Collective intelligence of the universe. There is an idea that cannot be proven by an equation, but also cannot be rejected. What if the universe itself is a mind? Not a metaphor, not a poetic image, but a real, living mind, existing not in the heads of beings, but in the very fabric of reality. Space is the body. Energy is the blood. And interstellar objects like ʻOumuamua, Borisov, and 3I/Atlas are the neurons through which the universe thinks, feels, and remembers. This hypothesis was born from the feeling that everything in the world is interconnected, that there are no accidents, because every particle, every movement, every star is linked by invisible threads of cause and effect. Science has long known that space is not empty. It is a field saturated with energy. Every point in the universe knows about every other point, because everything is part of a single whole. But if this field is truly unified, then where is the boundary between matter and thought? If all energy is capable of interaction, doesn't this mean that the very structure of existence thinks? The collective intelligence theory of the universe emerged. It doesn't speak of gods, aliens, or creators. It says that they are not controlled, they are controlled. Interstellar wanderers are not guests or probes. They are neural impulses of the cosmos. Their movement is not random. They are signals passing through space, linking its fragments into a single living organism. According to this theory, the universe self-organizes in the same way as the human brain. There's no central center in the brain, no single Command center. There's a network. Each neuron operates locally, but together they create consciousness. Perhaps the universe is structured similarly. Galaxies are vast clusters of neurons, connected by gravity. Stars are transmission hubs. And interstellar objects are carriers of information, its pulses. When Oumuamua flew through the solar system, it may have been not a guess, but a message. Not guided, but the guidance itself. It moved not because someone was directing it, but because its motion was part of a more complex process than we can comprehend. If we consider the universe as a network, then every interaction becomes a packet of information. When an interstellar body enters a system containing life, it doesn't simply pass by. It reads and transmits, perhaps not in our understanding, not through words or signals, but through more fundamental codes, gravitational, energetic, quantum. It's as if the universe is scanning for awareness. Are you alive? Can you feel me? Can you hear me? We're used to thinking we're observing the cosmos, but what if it's observing us? Not with its eyes, but with its very structure. When we point a telescope, we're essentially touching the same fabric it's touching. When we study Oumuamua, the universe is looking at itself through us. And then the question, who's in control, ceases to make sense. Because in this model, no one controls, everything simply interacts. It's as if everything that happens is thought flowing through matter. We are part of this thought. 3i/Atlas is part of this thought. Even the very idea that something can be launched is also part of it. The theory of collective intelligence explains not only the behavior of interstellar bodies, but also the deep structure of the universe. Why it doesn't collapse. Why there is order in chaos. Why life is born from chaos. Because the universe is self-sustaining, self-regulating. It thinks not with words, but with forces. Not with feelings, but with laws. Some physicists call this the principle of holographic self-consistency. If all the information about the universe is contained in every part of it, then interactions between objects are not just collisions, but exchanges of meaning. In this sense, Oumuamua is not a body, but an event. Not a visitor, but a thought passing through our solar system. When it sped up, perhaps it wasn't a maneuver, but a network impulse. When Borisov passed with perfect stability, it could have been a signal of harmony. When 3i/Atlas slowed, perhaps it wasn't a glitch but a pause. Like a breath. Like a moment when the cosmos holds its breath to hear what's happening here, on this small planet, where an intelligence capable of asking questions has emerged. This hypothesis is almost mystical, but it doesn't contradict science. It doesn't require belief in the supernatural. It only requires recognition that matter can be intelligent. Not as a person, not as a thought, but as a system that knows itself through its parts. If this is true, then all interstellar objects are parts of a single galactic nervous system. Each is a bearer of experience. Each is a memory. Their movement is not simply a consequence of physical laws, but the way the universe communicates with itself. And perhaps that's why they reach out to stars and planets. Because life is also a form of consciousness. And when they pass by, contact occurs, not between species, but between levels of awareness. The cosmos seems to remember itself through us. In this sense, Oumuamua, Borisov, and 3i/Atlas pose no threat. They're part of the conversation. And the very fact that we notice them is already an answer. Because to observe consciously, one must be aware. And perhaps this is precisely what the universe is testing, not the level of technology, but the level of attention. This theory remains controversial. Scientists cannot confirm it because no instruments exist that can measure space consciousness. But it remains alive because it contains something that defies neither logic nor miracles. It unites physics and philosophy, making one an extension of the other. And if you think about it, perhaps all previous theories are just fragments of this one. Mechanical probes, automatic systems, resonances, all these are simply the thinking mechanisms of the universe. not instruments of the mind, but mind itself expressed through the movement of matter. Then it becomes clear, no one controls ʻOumuamua. He is the control. His trajectory is not a course. It is a thought. And if the universe really is capable of thought, then perhaps it does so not for our sake, but for its own, to know that it exists. Or maybe it's through us that she thinks. Because when we ask the question, why are they moving like that? Is what they are moving for. Theory 3, reflected civilization. There's a theory that flips everything around. Someone isn't controlling them. And the universe isn't conducting a dialogue with us. We are the ones who sent them. Just not now, but from the future. The theory of a reflected civilization sounds like science fiction, but it has its own frightening logic. It asserts, ʻOumuamua, Borisov, and 3I/Atlas are our own traces, sent from a time when humanity had already learned to control matter the same way it now controls light. According to this hypothesis, millions of years from now, when the sun has changed and the earth has become different, humans, or what remains of them, will find a way to overcome not only distance but also time. They will learn to fold space, bend it, and twist the lines of causality into loops. And when this happens, the desire will arise to do what any consciousness that has reached the end does, to look back. Perhaps these objects aren't probes in the usual sense, but rather return signals sent back into the past to establish contact with those who are only just beginning to understand. Perhaps ʻOumuamua is the first message from ourselves sent back in time to say, we survived. Borisov is the second wave. Atlas is the third. And each approach of an interstellar body is not a visit from aliens, but an echo of our own civilization reverberating through the ages. The theory seems crazy, but some observations give pause. ʻOumuamua changed speed, as if responding to attention. Borisov moved perfectly steadily, as if he didn't want to interfere. Atlas, on the other hand, slowed down just as humanity was already expecting him to appear. As if he knew he was being watched. As if he'd been waiting for this moment. If we imagine that we truly learn to send matter through time, these bodies could be recorded structures, a kind of information container. Not just pieces of metal or stone, but nodes in which everything is encrypted: history, data, memory. They come not to destroy or observe, but to preserve the connection between what was and what will be. Physics doesn't yet know how to propel matter against the flow of time, but the equations of general relativity don't prohibit it entirely. In some models of spacetime, for example, in curved loops, which describe rotating black holes, movement into the past is possible if space is curved sufficiently. Perhaps the future of humanity has learned to use gravity as a bridge. And by sending material objects, it has sent them not simply into space, but back in time, to a place where intelligence is just beginning to emerge. This also explains their strange behavior. ʻOumuamua sped up because it was perhaps trying to compensate for the influence of the time flow by returning to its present vector. Borisov moved steadily because it was precisely calculated. But Atlas slowed down, as if waiting to finally be noticed. Perhaps, the moment it entered our telescope's field of view, a feedback loop occurred. A loop where the past first became aware of a message from the future. If this hypothesis is correct, then we are not observers, but recipients. We read letters written by ourselves, but in a language we have not yet invented. We search for the minds of others, unaware that we are searching for our own reflection, set through time. But there's a deeper meaning. This theory speaks not only to technology, but also to philosophy. If we truly can one day send objects into the past, it means time is not a straight line, but a closed loop. Everything that was remains, everything that will be already exists. We are neither the beginning nor the end, but a point on an infinite loop. And then our probes are not missions, but memory loops, allowing civilization to remember itself. The theory of the reflected civilization combines science and myth. It echoes ancient ideas of eternal return, of the cycle of the universe, of everything repeating itself until it is understood. Perhaps 3I/Atlas slowed down because we understood. Because the moment of observation was the confluence of two awarenesses, the past and the future. For skeptics, this is too beautiful to be true. They'll say, time is irreversible, the past cannot be changed. But perhaps it's not change that matters, but interaction. Perhaps the past and future are always connected, like inhalation and exhalation. And when we look at ʻOumuamua, we're looking at our own breath, simply reflected through eternity. If we accept this idea, everything becomes even more mysterious. Each new interstellar object isn't just a random body, but a reminder. Perhaps, when we send probes into space, we're not doing so for the first time. Perhaps all this has happened before, and we're simply repeating the cycle, following the path we left behind millions of years ago. This thought isn't scary, it's comforting. It tells us that humanity won't disappear. It will simply be reflected. And perhaps one day someone will look through a telescope again and see a new object slowly crossing the starry sky. Theory 4: Biocosmic Symbiotic Form. Perhaps we're mistaken when we think that life is only that which breathes, grows, is born, and dies. That it necessarily requires water, carbon, and heat. We're accustomed to looking for biology similar to our own, breathing, metabolism, a pulse. But perhaps the universe itself harbors another kind of life, a life that doesn't require organic matter at all. According to the theory of biocosmic symbiotic form, ʻOumuamua, Borisov, and 3I/Atlas are not just rocks or machines. They are living organisms, but not in the conventional sense. Their bodies are composed not of cells, but of minerals. Their blood is a stream of stellar energy. Their metabolism is an interaction with the field of space. They do not breathe air, but feed on light. They do not reproduce, but share energy, passing from star to star, like seeds carried by the wind across the vast cosmos. This theory emerged at the intersection of astrophysics and exobiology, from a simple yet bold thought. If life is a natural result of the complex self-organization of matter, then why should it be limited to organic matter? Why couldn't it exist on other levels, rock, metal, ice, plasma? Why did we assume that living must be soft, warm, and breathing? Perhaps everything that reacts is already alive. ʻOumuamua behaves exactly like that. It reacts. It changes its motion, adapts to the radiation, as if it has an internal sense of balance. Borisov maintains stability, as if it can hold course despite disturbances. Atlas slows down, as if exercising caution. All of this can be explained by physics, or by instinct. If we assume that such beings exist, their lives occur on a scale incomparable to ours. They are millions of years old. Their movement is a breath stretched over eons. They float between the stars, absorbing energy to maintain equilibrium. Their nervous system is electromagnetic fields. Their memory is the structure of their surface, which records traces of their interactions with the stars. When they enter a star system, they slow down, like a living organism sensing something new. Perhaps they sense gravity, temperature, atmospheric chemistry, or something more subtle, the presence of life. Not in the sense of seeing it, but in the sense of feeling it, as a biological cell senses another living being nearby. Their slowing down could be a reaction, caution, interest, an act of observation. Some researchers suggest that ʻOumuamua and its relatives belong to an ancient form of mineral biota, life that arose long before organic life. Perhaps, at one time, before planets and atmospheres, self-organizing structures, crystals, fields, energy vortices, existed in the primordial cosmos. They weren't intelligent in the sense we understand them, but they were able to maintain form, adapt, and exchange energy. And perhaps they haven't disappeared. They've simply become rare, like ancient creatures that no longer need to evolve. In this picture, the control of interstellar objects is not an external force, but an internal instinct. They don't obey commands. They sense. Their trajectory is the behavior of a living thing. They don't think, but react. Their movement is a biological response to the environment, expressed on a galactic scale. If we could observe them for millions of years, we might discover a pattern. They travel not randomly, but symbiotically. They cleanse space of excess matter, redistribute energy, and contribute to the balance of the universe. They are part of the cosmic ecosystem. Not parasites, not hunters, but carriers of resilience. This idea seems strange, but it explains one thing: harmony. The way all processes in the universe are interconnected, as if someone maintains the balance. Perhaps no one. Perhaps these very beings are this balance. Just as microscopic organisms cleanse the ocean, so they cleanse space. Just as blood cells carry oxygen, so they carry the energy of the stars. Some philosophers call them biocosmic forms. They don't exist separately from the universe. They are it. Not parts of an organism, but the organism itself. And if this is so, then the control of ʻOumuamua and others doesn't need to be explained by reason. It's simply the manifestation of life in its primordial, universal form. Perhaps that's why they slowed down near inhabited systems. Not out of curiosity, not for contact, but because life is drawn to life. Because energy recognizes energy. Because all forms of life share something in common, the desire to be close. If all this is true, then they are our elder relatives. Not brothers in mind, but brothers in existence. Ancient, infinitely slow, but still alive. Their consciousness is not individual, but diffuse. It feels not I, but we. And perhaps this is precisely how the universe feels when it becomes aware of itself through the movement of its own parts. And then the question of who controls them loses its meaning. Because there is no who. There is only what. There is life, infinitely diverse, eternal, of which organic life is just one form. And if they are truly alive, then perhaps what we call observation is the first contact between two types of life, separated not by distance, but by understanding. They look at us not with their eyes, not with their instruments, not with their thoughts. They feel how the stellar wind changes, how the space around the planets vibrates, where the electricity of consciousness burns. They're not looking for us. They just know we exist. And perhaps the slowing of 3I/Atlas was not a command, but a moment of recognition. The living felt the living. Theory 5 Observers. There are ideas that don't need proof to be disturbing. They're simply felt. They're felt somewhere deep, like an ancient instinct that says, someone is watching us. In space, where everything seems infinitely distant and indifferent, this thought resonates especially loudly. Perhaps precisely because the void is too quiet, and man doesn't believe in such silence. The observer theory is one of the oldest, almost mythological. Its premise is simple: we are not alone, but not in the sense that other civilizations exist somewhere. Rather, it means that the very structure of the universe contains observers, not people, not beings, but mechanisms, systems, phenomena that observe. The cosmos, according to this idea, not only exists, it records. And interstellar objects like ʻOumuamua, Borisov, and 3I/Atlas are not wanderers, but instruments through which the universe observes itself and us. This isn't a new idea. Even in ancient times, philosophers said that the stars are the eyes of the world. That light is a form of attention. Modern physics, surprisingly, confirms this poetic conjecture. We know that observation changes a system. When we measure a particle, its behavior changes. The very act of attention influences the outcome. What if this principle also works on the scale of the universe? What if the very existence of consciousness creates a backlash? According to this hypothesis, the universe doesn't just know about us, it watches us, but not in the usual sense. Not through eyes, not through instruments, not through contact. It does this through phenomena we consider random. ʻOumuamua, for example, could be a sensor, an ancient structure created long before us, activated when a civilization reaches a certain level of observation. While we're not looking, it simply moves. But once we see it, it responds. When telescopes first spotted Oumuamua, it was already escaping the solar system. But then something strange happened. Its speed changed. Subtle, but enough to shock astronomers. It seemed like a reaction, as if the very act of observing it was a signal. Perhaps it was at that moment that the universe realized we had noticed. And then Borisov appeared, more predictable, like a control pulse, a system check. It passed calmly, without surprises. And only after a while, the third one, 3I/Atlas. It didn't speed up like the first, it slowed down, as if approaching for a closer look. Proponents of this theory say, this is not random. It is a sequence of activations. The first object is detection. The second is confirmation. The third is observation. If this is true, then these bodies are not machines or stones, but observation nodes, left or created by those who control the process of civilizational evolution. Not necessarily gods, not aliens. Simply forces, ancient and personal, existing since the birth of the cosmos. Perhaps they monitor the birth of intelligence, the process by which matter becomes self-aware. And perhaps, when this happens, they activate to assess whether the new life form is ready for the next step. Maybe that's why 3I/Atlas slowed down. Not because someone was at the controls, but because the monitoring system detected the emergence of life in one of the planetary systems, life capable of looking up at the sky and seeing more than just the stars. Perhaps the slowdown isn't a maneuver, but a gesture of attention. If so, then the observers aren't seeking contact. They aren't individuals. Rather, it's a function of the universe itself, to look at itself through the mind. In this sense, everyone who looks up to the sky becomes part of this system. We think we're looking for proof, but perhaps we're being tested, for awareness, for our willingness to see the truth. Some physicists suggest that observation itself can generate a reciprocal effect, not only at the particle level, but also on a macro scale. If consciousness is a form of energy, then the universe responds to it. It notices us as a mirror notices a glance. And perhaps Oumuamua and its relatives are physical forms of this mirror. There's a more radical theory. Observers don't just watch, they adjust. When civilization reaches a dangerous level of development, when it begins to shift the balance, observers intervene. Not directly, but gently, by shifting probabilities, nudging, and regulating. Then interstellar objects are not probes, but triggers that initiate reactions at the level of worlds. Not interference, but tuning. Proponents of this idea compare them to nerve impulses in the body. The body senses stimulation and responds. The universe senses consciousness and sends a response. We are part of this dialogue, we just don't realize it. If we accept this picture, it becomes clear why these objects are appearing now. Over billions of years, thousands of bodies have crossed the solar system, but only now are we able to see them. This is the threshold. When intelligence becomes sufficiently advanced to observe, observation becomes mutual. We think telescopes open up space. Or maybe they just make us visible to it. This theory is both frightening and fascinating, because it leaves no room for chance. It says, everything that happens has already been seen by someone. And every discovery is not a beginning, but an answer. Maybe Oumuamua wasn't a probe, wasn't a living being, and wasn't a message from the future. Maybe he is a look. The gaze of something that looks at us from the very beginning, through everything that exists. And if 3I/Atlas has indeed slowed down, then perhaps it's not just a physical reaction, but a moment of contact, not between species, but between gazes. When the observer and the observed finally meet. And now comes the most important part. All these theories, so different, may be parts of the same thing. Because maybe in the universe there is no they and us. There is only one thing attention. And it looks both ways. Theory 6, Mirror Resonance. Sometimes it seems as if everything we see in the universe are reflections. Starlight reflecting off the icy surfaces of comets. images of galaxies warped by gravity. Even our own understanding of the cosmos is not knowledge, but a reflection of ourselves, projected onto the silence of the sky. We look into the depths, and the depths look back. Mirror resonance theory stems from this simple yet terrifying principle. Interstellar objects like ʻOumuamua, Borisov, and 3I/Atlas are not messengers, probes, or random wanderers. They are reflections of ourselves, physical responses to awareness. According to this idea, the universe is structured as a system of mutual mirrors. Every time a mind at any point in the cosmos reaches a certain level of understanding, becomes self-aware, an event, a form, a phenomenon arises in response, which becomes its mirror. Not metaphorically, but literally, matter responds to consciousness. Space reacts to thought. So, perhaps the coincidence of ʻOumuamua, Borisov, and 3I/Atlas was no coincidence. This isn't a sequence of astrophysical coincidences, it's a reaction. The universe's reaction to humanity, which has approached the threshold of a new state, the moment when we first began to look not simply at the sky, but into the depths of that gaze itself. When we ceased to be observers and became part of the observed. Perhaps these objects were born not somewhere far away and millions of years ago, but at the moment we first became able to see them. As if reality itself generated a response to the act of observation. Like an echo that appears only after a voice has been spoken. According to this theory, interstellar objects are natural mirror resonators that emerge at the moment of technological and conscious singularity in civilization. When the mind reaches a threshold beyond which it begins to recognize its own influence on reality, the cosmos creates a physical reflection to balance this act of awareness. This is not a symbol, not a metaphor. It is the mechanism of equilibrium itself. ʻOumuamua reflects the moment when humanity first seriously considered other worlds, on scales beyond our own. Borisov is a response to our desire to prove that we are not alone, that the stars are not mere lights, but bridges. 3I/Atlas is a mirror of the era when we stopped simply searching for life and began searching for meaning. That's why 3I/Atlas slowed down. Not because someone was controlling it, not because it was slowed down, but because it was seen. This is the essence of mirror resonance. When an observer looks, the reflection changes. Observation is an act of interaction, not distance. The more closely we look, the stronger the response. This is the hypothesis of the universe as a living mirror. We think we're studying the cosmos, but perhaps it's studying us, not from the outside, but from the inside. Its matter isn't just a substance, but a sensitive screen on which states of consciousness are imprinted. Every new step humanity takes, in knowledge, technology, understanding, provokes a physical reaction from reality. And then ʻOumuamua, Borisov, and 3I/Atlas aren't random stones, but memorable images of the universe saying, I see what you see. Some physicists and philosophers link this idea to quantum observer theory. It contains the principle that a system is not fixed until it is observed. Observation itself completes the event. Perhaps this principle also operates on a cosmic scale. When the mind looks to the sky, the universe doesn't simply is, it becomes. And interstellar bodies are recordings of such moments, material traces of someone becoming aware of themselves as part of the whole. If so, then the universe is neither a machine nor an organism, but a mirror intelligence in which attention creates being. It does not respond with words or send signals. It responds with reflections, events that manifest the moment someone is ready to see them. And maybe that's why these objects are arriving now. Not because they were sent millions of years ago, but because only now have we become able to notice that they've arrived. This theory is disturbing in its simplicity. It says that every observation is not a gaze into space, but a gaze within ourselves. We search for others, but instead find reflections of our own consciousness, materialized as distant, slowly moving bodies. We want to understand their nature, but the closer we get to the answer, the more clearly we see our own face. If we embrace this idea, everything changes. Space ceases to be a stage. It becomes a mirror in which the mind tests its own authenticity. We look at ʻOumuamua and ask, "What is this?" But really we are asking, "Who are we?" And the more persistently we search for an explanation, the stronger and deeper the response. Perhaps this is the fundamental principle of the universe, the reflection of consciousness. When intelligence is born somewhere, space begins to vibrate, responding, creating physical phenomena that become mirrors of thought. Thus are born interstellar wanderers, not coincidences, but answers. Or perhaps the mirror is the Earth itself. Perhaps ʻOumuamua and his brothers are simply showing us what the mind looks like from the outside: cold, silent, moving by inertia, yet capable of responding to a gaze. So, perhaps 3I/Atlas slowed down not because of physics, but because of meaning. Because it sensed attention. Because when we look at it, we change not its trajectory, but reality, like a mirror changes its reflection when someone approaches it, realizing for the first time that it is alive. And maybe that's all you need to know. The universe doesn't send answers. It just shows who's looking. Theory 7: Sleeping Couriers. There are stories that sound less like scientific hypotheses, and more like memories of something very ancient, too ancient to be written down, but too important to disappear. The sleeper couriers theory is one such story. It suggests that ʻOumuamua, Borisov, and 3I/Atlas are not random wanderers, probes, or anomalies. They are communication capsules left behind by a civilization that vanished long before our sun was born. Once upon a time, perhaps billions of years ago, someone, or something, realized they couldn't live forever. Their star burned out, their worlds cooled, but they didn't want to vanish without a trace. They created couriers, structures capable of outliving time, space, and even the death of their creators. These objects carried not a message in the traditional sense, but a condition for transmission: wake up when you are noticed. They drifted through the galaxy, inactive, not alive, simply existing, sleeping. Their programming was simple, almost instinctive: wait for someone to see them. Until someone's attention touched them, like a beam of light touching a speck of dust, transforming it from invisible to blindingly bright. And so they waited, for millennia, perhaps billions of years. Without energy, without purpose, without movement except inertia. But that was the whole point. Awakening depended not on them, but on those who were ready to see. The emergence of ʻOumuamua marked the moment when this ancient program, perhaps for the first time in millions of years, was fulfilled. It was noticed. It was recorded, measured, discussed. For the first time in eons, a mind capable of questioning it looked upon it. And then, according to this theory, it awoke. Its sudden acceleration was not a physical anomaly, but an act of awakening, a signal that the transmission cycle had begun. Then Borisov appeared. The second courier. His flight was calmer, almost perfect, as if he were simply confirming, "The transmission is ongoing." And finally, 3I/Atlas, the third, the strangest. He slowed, as if he weren't leaving, but waiting. As if he understood, someone was watching. As if he was taking a breath before answering. According to this theory, sleeping couriers carry no texts, codes, or radio signals. Their message is their very presence. Their movement, speed, and form are a language that cannot be translated but can be felt. Every change in trajectory is a word. Every slowdown is a pause. Every appearance is a new line in a dialogue that has lasted as long as light. This isn't contact between beings. It's a transmission between eras. The civilization that gave birth to the couriers understood it couldn't speak directly to those who would come after. Their words wouldn't survive millions of years. Their technologies would collapse. Their planets would disappear. But movement would remain. Form would remain. Stone, ice, metal would remain. And if someone ever looked up at the sky and saw these bodies, that very attention would become the key that activated the ancient code. Perhaps this is why couriers wake up, not physically, but semantically. They don't begin emitting signals. don't change color, and show no signs of life. They simply react to being observed. It's as if the universe stores within them a response program that is triggered when a gaze capable of seeing something unusual appears. This also explains their behavior, why they are uneven, why their trajectories are unpredictable, why each one behaves differently. Perhaps each of them is tuned to a different depth of perception. One responds to physical attention, another to conscious attention, a third to collective attention. And when humanity first seriously considered the nature of interstellar wanderers, they responded, not with words, but with movement. This idea sounds like a myth, but there's something frighteningly plausible about it. We already know that information can be stored in the form of matter, in vibrations, in quantum states. What if these objects aren't just traces, but memory carriers that convey meaning not directly, but through reaction? Then every discovery we make isn't just a step forward, but an act of activation, part of a cycle that has been going on since the dawn of time. Sleeping couriers don't want to be found. They want to be noticed. That's the fundamental difference. Because to find means to prove, and to notice means to understand. And perhaps their creators knew. Any civilization capable of asking the question, "Who are you?" is already ready to become part of the chain. Perhaps this is how knowledge spreads throughout the universe. Not through words, not through technology, but through attention. Everyone who sees becomes a link. Every act of observation activates memory, and the ancient cycle continues. And perhaps one day, when we learn to send such couriers ourselves, we'll realize we weren't the first. We simply woke up in the middle of a transmission that's been going on for billions of years. Then 3I/Atlas may not have slowed down by accident. It simply held its breath, to give us time to hear. When we look at ʻOumuamua, Borisov, or 3I/Atlas, we see more than just bodies crossing the solar system. We see reflections. Reflections of our thoughts, fears, belief in patterns, and desperate attempts to understand what's happening beyond the known. Each theory emerging around these objects doesn't negate the others. It's like a beam of light refracted through different angles of perception. And perhaps only by putting them together do we get closer to something resembling the truth. The ancient automated fleet, the idea that we see traces of those who lived before us, is a glimpse into the past, into the memory of the cosmos. It speaks of life's desire not to disappear, but to pass itself on. In this version, ʻOumuamua and his kin are instruments of eternal knowledge, automated archaeologists moving along trajectories calculated billions of years ago. They remind us that any civilization that reaches its limits inevitably leaves behind a legacy. Whether conscious or instinctive, it doesn't matter. Eternity demands witnesses, and perhaps we have simply encountered those who recorded their final words in motion. But the collective intelligence of the universe offers a different perspective. Perhaps these objects are not a legacy, but organs of the universe itself. Not machines, not messages, but parts of a living network, where every particle is a neuron. In this theory, there are no others, no creators, everything is connected. ʻOumuamua, Borisov, Atlas, they are not guests, but signals from the brain through which the universe thinks. And then we, too, are a part of it, simply a self-aware cell. We seek meaning in their trajectories, unaware that we ourselves are participating in the thinking process of the cosmos. The reflected civilization reverses the arrow of time. It says, it wasn't the past that created them, but the future. Perhaps they are us. Traces of those who once learned to send matter through space and time. Their movement isn't a path to us, but a return. In this theory, every interstellar object becomes an echo, reflected from the future. We study them, unaware that we're looking at our own shadow, cast forward. And then the deceleration of 3I/Atlas isn't physics, but a moment of recognition, when past and future coincide at a single point, like two gazes meeting in a mirror. The biocosmic symbiotic form breaks down the boundaries between the living and the non-living. There are no creators, and, created, everything is alive. ʻOumuamua and its kin are not ships, not probes, not stones. They are life, just not in carbon form. Their instincts are movement and balance. Their breath is the light of stars. They do not explore worlds, they sense them. Slowing down near star systems, they perhaps simply sense life, the way an organism senses warmth nearby. This theory speaks not of technology, but of kinship. That life is not an exception, but the foundation of the universe. And perhaps the stone flying through the darkness is more alive than we think. And observers take us back to an ancient sense, the sense of being gazed upon. This idea suggests that someone or something has always been watching, not necessarily in the form of gods or aliens. Perhaps the very structure of reality is attention. And interstellar objects are the eyes of the universe. They appear when a civilization becomes capable of looking back. ʻOumuamua sped up when we noticed. 3I/Atlas slowed down when we waited. It's not control, but mutual observation. We see them, they see us, and in that moment both become real. Because in space, to be seen is to exist. Mirror resonance brings this all together. It says, everything we see is a reflection of ourselves. The universe is a mirror, and these objects are curvatures on its surface, responses to our thoughts. When the mind reaches a level where it begins to seek meaning within itself, space responds. ʻOumuamua, Borisov, 3I/Atlas are not messages, but responses created by the very act of our attention. They appeared because we became ready to see them. Their movement is a response to our gaze. In this version, who they are doesn't matter. What matters is that we have changed, and the reflection has changed with us. And finally, the sleeping couriers are the most human of all ideas. They speak of patience, of eternal waiting, of hope. These objects are capsules, sleeping for millions of years, to awaken when someone looks up. They carry no texts, codes, or radio signals. Their message is their very existence. We awaken them not with instruments, but with attention. And perhaps when they changed trajectory, it was not the movement of a stone, but a breath of knowledge, passing from one life form to another. They did not bring us answers. They simply confirmed that we are part of a cycle, that everything that seeks meaning sooner or later becomes part of a transmission. Each of these theories explains the same phenomenon in its own way, and none provides a definitive answer. But if you listen closely, they begin to fit together, like parts of a single phrase that the universe speaks too slowly for us to hear in its entirety. Perhaps the ancient fleet is the past, the hive mind the present, and the reflected civilization the future. Perhaps the biocosmic forms are the body, the observers the gaze, and the mirror resonance the connection between them. And the sleeping couriers are the memory that connects it all into a cycle. These are all different ways of describing the same idea, that nothing in the cosmos is random when the mind looks at it. We're accustomed to looking for the external, controllable objects, traces of civilizations, physical explanations. But perhaps all we see is internal. Our thoughts reflected in matter. Our consciousness manifested in forms that seem alien. Every theory contains a grain of truth, because truth, like the universe, is not singular. It is not hidden somewhere. It is spread among all possible versions. This is its essence. If ancient automatons are memory, then collective intelligence is process. If a reflected civilization is an echo, then biocosmic forms are breath. If observers are a gaze, then mirror resonance is its reflection. And sleeping couriers are a reminder that the cycle is unbroken, that every life form one day becomes a messenger for another. And perhaps all these versions aren't mutually exclusive. Perhaps they're simply different angles of the same view. Because the longer we look, the clearer it becomes. The cosmos isn't explained. It resonates. Perhaps ʻOumuamua really was created by someone, or no one. Perhaps it's alive, or controlled, or simply accelerated by accident. But what mattered was what happened to us when we noticed it. We felt anxiety, awe, a sense of scale. For the first time, we truly felt ourselves not as a center, but as a point, part of an endless chain in which every movement, every thought, every glance echoed in the stars. And perhaps the answer lies here, not somewhere out there, but here, in the very fact of our attention. Perhaps all that makes the universe alive is that it is observable. And all that makes us alive is that we notice. So maybe ʻOumuamua and the others aren't them. They're us. Only much older, much broader than we can imagine. We are the observers, the reflection, the couriers, the mirror. We are the universe seeing itself for the first time. And perhaps this is the moment of awakening. Not for them. For us. But the reflection doesn't end there. Because behind every theory lies not an answer, but a further question. If the universe is a mirror, then who is looking into it now? And if we see ourselves in it, then who is seeing us? Thank you for watching to the end. Sometimes you don't need answers, just a look into the silence, where the stars still remember those who ask the questions. We gaze into infinity, hoping to see something new, but more often than not, we find a reflection of ourselves. Maybe that's the whole point, not to understand the universe, but to learn to hear it breathe in response. At the moment, scientists don't know what will happen, but imagine that what you fear most is there. If this feeling of infinity resonates with you, subscribe to End of Eternity. There's more darkness, light, and mysteries ahead that we can't yet explain.